This is Saudi Arabia, so is this, and so is this. Saudi Arabia has been open to tourists for only 5 years, and almost no one knows what it's really like and what hidden gems it has to offer. For those curious about discovering Saudi, I will be sharing some tips and tricks that will hopefully make your adventure really worthwhile, as I was lucky enough to travel with a local throughout my journey. Hi, I'm Valeria. I live in Zurich, Switzerland. I work in fintech, but today I'm going to talk about something completely different, how I spent 2 weeks exploring a side of Saudi Arabia that literally nobody talks about, because my dad has lived in the country for the past 5 years, and he organized this amazing itinerary based on advice from his local friends. The start and end point of our trip was Riyadh, but we explored this mostly at the end. We first headed to Al-Ula, this magical oasis city in the heart of the desert. We then drove to Medina, which is an incredible spiritual place. And then we proceeded on to Jeddah, which is a stunning and lively port city on the Red Sea. As we headed south, we decided to spend the night in the Asir Mountains, but we suffered car damage and had to wait for rescuers on a mountain filled with baboons. After this mishap, we eventually got to Jizan, and from the city we took excursions to the tropical islands of Farasan and to canyons in the mountains of Fayfa. Finally, we drove all the way back to Riyadh and enjoyed the capital before flying back to Switzerland. We visited 9 different cities, and the trip was just over 2 weeks long. Okay, let's get started. Yalla. I flew in from Zurich to Riyadh, and the energy hit me immediately. Cranes everywhere, investments pouring in from all over the world. It really looks like the country is transforming itself in real time. The next day, we woke up super early and drove the entire day to get to Al-Ula, the ancient oasis in the north of the country. We drove through beautiful, rugged desert landscapes, and we tried to make as little stops as possible because we really didn't want to drive in the desert after sunset. In the end, we almost succeeded and only spent the last hour driving in the dark. The next morning, we went for a ride around the amazing canyons of Al-Ula. It was surprising to see the extent of this oasis in the middle of the desert, and to explore its peaceful and dramatic landscapes. We then drove to an ancient bread maker who produces his bread in a bakery in the heart of some deep canyons. It was really fun to try to find this bakery hidden in these narrow corridors. Sadly, when we got there, we learned that the bakery had been closed and replaced by a cafe. But hey, it's about the journey, not the destination. And the cafe was really, really gorgeous. In the afternoon, we went to see Maraya, a stunning 10,000 square meter concert hall clad entirely in mirrors that reflect the dramatic desert landscapes around it. The world's most famous artists perform here. It is the world's largest mirror building, and remarkably, it was built in just 2.5 months in 2019. If you want to take good pictures, I would recommend visiting right before sunset or at dawn. However, Al Maraya can only be visited either by guests of the adjacent 5-star resorts or by people who pre-booked a tour of the building. This can be done easily through this link here. Afterwards, we went to Elephant Rock, which really does look like a cute elephant. We enjoyed the last glimpse of light at some outdoor bars. A local Saudi even came over to sit with us and started teaching us some expressions in Arabic. And the language was so warm and poetic that I've since started dabbling in Arabic, actually. Inshallah, I'll soon be able to have some real conversations with people. For dinner, we went to Entrecôte Hotel de Paris Al-Ula, which I know is European food, but it was really, really delicious. By the way, it was not my birthday, that was just a joke. I was celebrating the end of my master's thesis in Cambridge. But so far, we hadn't seen the main event of Al-Ula yet. The next day, we headed to see the monumental tombs of Hegra, which have been built over 2,000 years ago by the same population who built Petra, the Nabataeans. This unbelievable historical site has only recently opened to tourists in 2020. But these tombs were massive. Some were over 15 meters tall. It was truly so stunning. A pro tip: to properly enjoy Hegra, I would suggest taking the private Land Rover tour instead of the group buses, because this way you're not influenced by the schedule of the group and you can enjoy this beautiful heritage site at your own pace. In the afternoon, we went to see the orchards of the oasis of Al Ula, and this was really such a joyous experience, as these orchards were full of lush fields and really cute farm animals, and it was honestly the perfect place to cool off from the sun. To enjoy our last sunset in Al Ula, we drove to the top of a volcanic plateau which overlooks the entire Al Ula Valley and oasis. We really got a sense of how big and beautiful it was, and the colors at sunset were really gorgeous. So then we were on the road again, heading this time to Medina, the second religious city after Mecca. Arriving in Medina definitely felt different, and you could really feel the spiritual weight. The next day, we traveled to Jeddah, the beautiful port city overlooking the Red Sea. We explored the promenade by the seaside and enjoyed a stunning sunset. We then headed over to the old town, Al-Balal. The old town was bustling with people and live music. We walked through these markets selling gold, fabrics, spices, jewelry, you name it. My favorite restaurant was less well known, and we came by it by chance. It was a barbecue restaurant where they made really juicy goat kebab with herbs, and you could dip it into a really nice yogurt sauce. By the way, I link all of these places in my guide in the description below. The other delicious restaurant that we went to was fish-based, and it was a very famous restaurant of Al-Balal. We had some delicious grilled fish, but you have to consider that there will be a bit of waiting time, but you can walk around this incredibly lively neighborhood as you wait for a table. On the way south to Jizan, we stopped in Qunfudhah, a small coastal city on the Red Sea. This is where Saudi Arabia's south really begins. Fewer tourists and more authenticity. Before heading all the way south to Jizan, we decided to spend a night in the Asir Mountains. These mountains are 3,000 meters above sea level, and we wanted to go experience the fresh air that Saudis normally seek in summer to escape the desert. We made a quick stop at Riyadh Almaa, a 900-year-old mountain village with stone fortresses and colorful windows. It was really like something out of a fairy tale, but we couldn't stay long because the sun was starting to set and we wanted to reach our Airbnb in the mountains before dark. When we were about an hour away from our final destination, we started driving up a really steep mountain. There were really no villages around, and the mountain was filled with packs of baboons. Now I have this moment on camera. An alarm started going off in our car. Turns out the road was very steep, the car was super heavy, and the AC had been on for a really long time, so the motor was overheating. Thankfully, we managed to reach the top of the mountain and stop the car on the side of the road. But we didn't know how to reach the Airbnb without the car, and we didn't know what to do with the car. Suddenly, this big black SUV pulled over, and this young guy in his 30s came out. He introduced himself as Dr. Ibraheem. He said he wanted to help us and that he could take us to our Airbnb in the mountains. We did protest initially, but he really insisted. Finally, the taxi arrived and we split between the taxi and Dr. Ibraheem's car. I obviously went with Dr. Ibraheem because I was pretty starstruck at this stage. All in all, it was a bit scary to get stuck in the Saudi mountains, but at least we got the full experience of Saudi hospitality. The next morning, we woke up in the beautiful mountains of the Asir province in As-Sudah and waited for our tour guide from Jizan to come pick us up. We had also organized for a tow truck to come pick up the car and drive it to Jizan as well. We arrived in Jizan just in time for lunch and had a delicious meal at Masnaf, a restaurant chain specialized in southern Saudi cuisine. The next morning, we took the boat super early to go see the beautiful islands of Farasan, with coral reefs, mangroves, and beautiful wildlife. And here, my finance brain couldn't help noticing that it's crazy how it's all undeveloped real estate. But I don't think this will last very long. We took a boat to go snorkeling in the most remote areas of the island, and it really looked like the beaches were reserved for us. We were literally the only visitors there. After exploring the coral reef and the Red Sea, we ventured into the mangroves forest and saw beautiful, elegant pelicans. We then sailed to an isolated beach island and had an entire pristine beach to ourselves. This just doesn't happen anymore. We again had some absolutely delicious seafood at a local restaurant. Farasan Islands were really so peaceful, and it felt like we were visiting some desert paradise islands. The colors were absolutely stunning. The water was so blue and so clear, and the sand was super white and soft. The next day we visited Wadi Lajab in Sarat Abida, a canyon with a riverbed which has water all year round, which apparently is very rare for Saudi Arabia. We were escorted through the canyon by a man from the Abida tribe, which is a traditional tribe of the Asir region. I can tell you this guy was a really good climber. We followed him up and down some lower rocks and across the river. The water was really cold but refreshing. You could even get a pedicure from those fish that are used in spas that eat off your skin. Those swim in this wadi in nature. However, I found these fish to be really aggressive and I really squealed. So here is this embarrassing clip. I also had another dangerous encounter when I was chased by an adult monkey while trying to feed a baby monkey with some fruits. In other words, the Wadi in Sarat Abida was definitely super adrenaline packed and an absolute highlight of my trip. Finally, before heading back to Jizan, we headed up to the super green Fayfa mountains to experience breathtaking views and cooler temperatures. So in the city of Fayfa, we stopped in Fayfa Luxury Hotel just for a coffee, but we enjoyed breathtaking views from their top terrace. The coffee came with some dates, and this is always the case, but this time there was also a really tasty peanut cream that you could dip the dates in, and this was so delicious. I had 2 servings of this. I should have saved more space in my stomach though for the delicious, tender mandi goat that we had for lunch. We then moved on to another viewpoint, Ar Raith Harub. Sorry for the pronunciation. You would really not expect Saudi Arabia to look this green, and the air was so thick and fresh. I really love traveling to parts of the world where nature is still so pristine. The next day, it was time to say goodbye to the south of Saudi Arabia and to Jizan, and we got in the car and drove all the way back to Riyadh. The plan was to explore Riyadh for the last days of our Saudi adventure. We went to visit Diriyah, the neighborhood where Saudi Arabia basically began because it was the capital of the first Saudi state. Now there's markets, restaurants, events. It's a really cool vibe. What is interesting is you also see a lot more young people in Riyadh than you do in European cities. And in fact, 63% of the population in Saudi Arabia is below age 30. So you really also feel this when you're walking around the streets. Wow, like I'm surrounded by people my age. The next day, we left Riyadh and drove to the so-called edge of the world, a 300-meter cliff dropping into endless desert, rock formations, and complete silence except for the wind. You need a 4x4 to get there, and it feels incredibly remote, which is exactly the point. After 2 weeks of discovering hidden Saudi Arabia, this felt like the perfect final adventure. On our last evening in Saudi Arabia, we had tickets to go see the Italian Super Cup final at King Saud University Stadium. After 2 weeks of remote mountains and empty beaches, being in a packed stadium full of Saudis singing Italian football chants in Italian, which by the way is my mother tongue, was just incredible. It really showed me how global and connected this country has become while still keeping its unique character. It was such a fun evening and a superb way to end our Saudi Arabia trip, which was certainly surprising and utterly enchanting. So this is what to do in 14 days in Saudi Arabia. Let me know if and how you have experienced Saudi. This is really the most surprising and authentic country you can visit, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you end up going, tag me. I genuinely want to see your Saudi story. Bye!